Alright, what's going on, guys? Today I'm going to show you guys how I made this Kirby style drop. So I've spent the last couple of days analyzing the Kirby style, and I've come to the conclusion that I know what sets his songs apart from everything else. I like to call it melodic percussion. Check this out. This is percussion, and this is also percussion. Except this piece of percussion is tonal. So once you find yourself a tonal percussion sound like this one, make sure to find what root note it's set at. This one's set at C. From that point, you can play with the envelope, shaping the way the sound gets played out, adding some time from the initial hit or adding some attack, for example. And then you can add effects such as reverb and stereo enhancer, which makes 100% difference. And then because it's tonal, you create yourself a melody. And so using this sample, you can create your very own melody. Make sure to sample your first initial hit right here. Sample that with a bunch of reverb and then reverse that sample and you get this sort of effect, which then glides right into the first hit, filling that space and making it have so much movement. From that point, you add layers and make it a fuller sound, but we're gonna get to that. But now let's get into the drums. I've structured it so that the first part of the drop really only has a kick. So let's talk about this kick. Picture a punchy kick. All right, now make that even punchier and you've got this ridiculously punchy kick. And as you can see, I've even boosted and clipped the file. This is honestly just something that I've found in a lot of Kirby tracks, long and punchy kicks. And when you're doing so, you have to make sure your sidechain corresponds to that. If you have a long sub in your kick, you gotta have a long dip in your sidechain in order to give your mix some space to let that kick be itself. Alright, so after that first segment of the just kick, we introduce our clap. So this clap consists of two separate parts. First part here. This is a clap from my MADLOUD sample pack, which is free and linked in the description down below. And the second clap here is a sample that I found, and I've just added a bunch of reverb to that. So layer those together, make sure they're appropriately volumed, and I put them all into a drum bus. So together the kick and clap. And then we get into the second part of the drop where we introduce a bunch of percussion and of course hats. Here is our main hat that you will be hearing, occupying mainly the high, mids to treble. Now I like to make sure my hats fill the upper end of your mix as opposed to synths and whatnot. And then we've got this extra little hat here, which is very low in the background. We've used the cut function to make sure it's like a low pass filter. And it's actually also going into the sidechain so it doesn't hit on the kick, just to keep the kick clean. Sometimes you can leave it in, but remember it does mess with the frequency because you're compressing everything together. So those two hats together so far sound like this. And then we're also adding a break. And as you can see, we are automating the volume so that it doesn't hit on every beat. It just it's like a manual sidechain, but it's a bit more impactful than the actual sidechain. And on top of that, we're routing it into the sidechain, so it's like double up. This is any way we can ensure it doesn't add to the kick and the clap. It's just in order to add everything in between. So together, so far, all the drums sound like this. Also, there's this minor thing when we're introducing the clap. We've just resampled the clap and reversed it in so that you get this reverse clap sound effect. Now we're gonna get into the melody. Alright, so of course I've touched on the melodic percussion, that's the main element. Now let's talk about how we've layered it. Right, so as you can see here, there are two layers of SERUM. The first one sounds like this. It's a basic custom FM shape using basic shapes and sync. It kind of duplicates that original sound. Slightly detuned upwards and another oscillator slightly detuned downwards. This is kind of creating that detuned sound without using unison, but you also can use unison to add more to it. And then a square wave on the sub oscillator and some noise, all routed into, of course, first of all this filter here and then another filter here on everything. If you decide to put direct out on these two, they won't be affected by the effects, but there you go. These will be included in the file. I've got an entire 50 preset library called Metamorphosis, which you can find in the description down below. Second layer sounds like this. Quite low, again, just slightly detuned, playing around with the pitch on the first, using a very short envelope to modulate the coarse pitch. You kind of get that slappy sound. And then the final layer here is this bleep sound effect. It's kind of another melodic percussion, but it's much lower compared to the original melody, and altogether they sound like this. Stacking. All right, and that brings us onto the sub and bass. My favorite part, it's the easiest part in my mind, and the key here is not necessarily sound selection. That's very important, but it's also important to play with harmonies. You don't have to create super complex chords in order to harmonize. When you play notes that aren't the same notes as your melody, you get really interesting effects here. For example, the first melody note is an F sharp and our sub is playing a D, and those two harmonize together. So anyway, the sub and the bass, they sound like this. The sub is one of my 50 presets from my Metamorphosis pack. Very simple. This is just a simple sub sine wave that is compressed and slightly distorted, and then we're just playing around with some filtering, and then there's this bass layer. You could honestly replace that bass layer with anything. That's just kind of to fill more of the spectrum, and we've stereoed this bass layer. You may not stereo your sub. It just messes with everything. You have a much cleaner and much louder mix if your sub is in mono. But your bass, as long as your bass is not hitting those sub notes, you can stereo that, and then you get this wide effect. By this harmony effect I was talking about earlier, let me show you what I mean. It's very minor. It's like subconscious, but it's nice, bro. Okay, next up, very important actually, element in a Kirby style track, toms. So I've created this sound right here. We're following this swing that is in the song. As you can see, we are not exactly on the grid. We are, this would be on grid, this is off grid. That's just the swing that we've decided to use for this song. And we are hitting these toms every time the melody is not. It's like filling in the gap of the melody. We got the do 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 do. It's like an A part, B part, question and answer. It's just very clean, very simple, and it works melodically. Layered with this melodic tom, we've just got a atonal tom sound effect. So those together sound like this. Just creating a bit more punch. You could go even crazier on this. This is as basic as it will go. Change the tom sound effects. That's just the fun part to play around with. Also, distorting toms can create insane effects. I recommend Camel Crusher. I think it's free, yeah. The key takeaway, I think, is Kirby plays with things that are oftenly not used as melodic driving forces and turns them into melodic things, such as percussion and toms being the main melodic drop element. And it's just so fun. And I think that goes to show, try something new and be a trailblazer, that's the best way to create a style. That's why Kirby tracks sound so different. And maybe he doesn't even do it consciously. Maybe that's just what he likes the sound of. All right, guys. And then next up, we've got this nice, clean vocal. I'm not actually super sure if it's perfectly in the right key. You look just like me under these lights. Whether it is or not, you can replace it. I think it is. We've got some effects on here, most notably stereo enhancer. Again, play with your stereo. Make use of it, definitely. And I think this vocal here being very ambient has its right place being, spaced around. Placement of where your vocal hits is very important. As you can see, the melody doesn't hit on the first hit, so it's nice that the vocal doesn't either. So it's like we're anticipating it. We've got kick, you. There it is, that's fun. You're playing with people's expectations. I actually, I tried to sing on this, make my own vocal. It didn't really work. I decided to delete the file. Why did I even say that? People are gonna now ask to get that file. Well, join the Discord. Maybe I can put the file in there just for you guys to use, have fun with. The Discord is linked in the description of this video. All right, and then similarly, we have this reverse vocal effect. Next up, this whole intro bit here, basically your pre-drop. We've pretty much just used the same bass line, but have gotten rid of that initial hit, because that initial hit is just to complement the kick. And there is no punchy kick in the intro. We've just used a kick, but EQ'd it out a little bit. As you can see, just mad EQ'd out. And it's just kind of anticipating people. It's like, oh, it's coming. It's there, it just needs to EQ in. And then we're introducing the break here also. And then there's this riser that's hitting with a sort of built-in sidechain. Now, using this sort of built-in sidechain using the volume automation is kind of interesting, because people, without noticing, they start to get used to the sound of a sidechain. So when the drop rolls around, they know that feeling. It works very well. Subtle mind tricks, guys. And then this right here is totally not a Kashmir build-up. But if it works, it works. You know what I'm saying? And then as you can see, finally here, this transition sound effect. So yeah, guys, it's really that simple. I tried to make this video in a way that it's just like kind of concise and easy to follow. But if you want to go into more depth, be sure to go into the Discord, linked in the description down below. This is a free FLP, which means the first link in the description of this video will bring you to the FLP file. And yeah, you can go ahead and release it. All I ask is that you subscribe. I think that is all. I'm just going to check my notes to make sure I didn't forget anything. Planning a video and then recording it always goes kind of differently, but I'm glad you stuck around and you're still watching this bit. That means you're part of like the 1% of viewers that actually makes it this far into a video, because my average retention is like less than a minute. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Peace.